I'm Steven, and I'm a level 1 chef.
I'm Beth, and I'm a level 2 chef.
I'm Sim Cass, and I've been a baker since 1973.
So I came up with this recipe basically anytime my friends would come over and they said, let's spend money. And I'm like, absolutely not. We're gonna make our own and it's gonna cost under $10.
It's a really special recipe because this recipe has my mother-in-law's sauce. Sadie came all the way from Shaka, Sicily, and this recipe is an homage to her.
This pizza has a soft, airy interior with a nice crusty shell on it and a lot of flavor. We're going to start with the dough.
This is my store-bought dough, which is nice and ready.
The dough has to rise, so I'm going to use some active dry yeast.
Into our water, and we're going to let that dissolve. This is a 3-day dough, and this is the first day. Then we're going to add our flour. We're going to mix this together. This scraper, easiest thing to use.
I'm going to put my mixer on low. I only have flour in the mixer right now. I'm going to add some salt. I'm going to slowly pour in some olive oil. Add the yeast mixture, and the dough is just going to come together in a sticky mess.
It's not really going to come together. It's going to be very scruffy.
You can tell that it's very, very sticky, and that's exactly what you want. I'm going to cover the dough, put it in the fridge overnight.
And this gets left outside, not in the refrigerator, for 12 to 17 hours. This is going to develop flavor. And when we add it to our dough tomorrow, it's going to add a lot of nice holes in our pizza. Now, we're going to make our main dough with flour, water, salt, and yeast. Then, we're going to add the pre-ferment, biga in Italian. This is the same pre-ferment that I made earlier, only this one is 24 hours old. It's now developed and has these nice big holes in it and lots of flavor. Lastly, I'm going to add some starter. This particular one has been around for about 3 years. This will add a lot of flavor. This dough will be wet. I turn it onto the table, turning the dough into itself to get it going, and you're going to push this forwards and backwards on the table. Now, I'm going to start pulling it into itself. Look, now I've got a pizza dough right here. I'm going to oil my bowl here. We're going to cover it, and we're going to leave it in the refrigerator overnight. And that's going to be yet another way to introduce even more flavor into our dough.
So now we're gonna get started on the sauce. This is a store-bought sauce. This is a tomato basil. This gives it a little bit of the aroma that we're looking for.
First of all, get your pan hot. Then you're going to get some good olive oil in there.
The oil is coming up to temperature. I just cut my garlic right into the pan.
You want your onions. I'm just getting a little color on my onions, and then I put my garlics into that little space. I'm now smelling this garlic.
There's no better smell. I'm going to strain the crushed tomatoes because I really don't like the taste of the seeds.
In goes my whole tomatoes, that's good. And now I add about half that amount of puree. I put a little oregano in, 2 or 3 bay leaves. I also like to add a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, a good gloopy glue in there, all right? Fresh ground pepper in.
Same amount of salt. And about 10 leaves of fresh basil.
And I'm just gonna be Italian about it and just throw it in like that. Now I'm gonna reduce temperature.
When it's nice and thick, you know it's done.
The idea of cooking the sauce for 3 or 4 hours is to take the acidity out of the tomatoes. If we put a little sugar in, we can reduce the cook time to about an hour, hour and a half.
You can see that the sauce has reduced.
The tomatoes have disappeared and it's ready to go on the top of our pizza.
Next step is preparing the cheese. I like to use the mozzarella.
Part skim, so it's a little bit on the healthier side.
I only use whole milk mozzarella. I really don't think that if you're eating pizza, you need to worry about a diet. And it tastes so much better.
The mozzarella, I'm going to slice in. I think it should be round, like a pizza. I like to put grated Parmesan at the bottom of a pizza.
I think that the Pecorino Romano has a better taste than the Parmesan.
And I like to put the peeled Parmesan in the center. Then I like to put some bel paese, very, very creamy cheese.
You can't get too much cheese on a pizza.
So now we're gonna get our toppings ready. We have some fresh pepper. We're gonna use about half of each. This is just so we can add a little bit of color. If you're a pro like myself, you know that you wanna keep your fingers out of the way. Okay, that was close. I tried to include the seeds in there. It looks ready. So now we're gonna get to the mushrooms.
Pre-cooked. Most toppings I pre-cook.
Watch your fingers. I feel like somewhere there's like a chef that's screaming.
All I put on the pizza is basil. My husband, Richie, doesn't like anything on his pizza. So this pizza, I'm making for him.
Calamari olives, make sure there's no pips in there. The sausages, put them in the oven, cook them through. I like them fairly thin and sort of long. Now we're going to put our pizza together.
Here's our dough. It waited for us 24 hours. All we have to do is pinch off a piece.
Then I put a lot of flour on the table.
To make the dough less sticky.
And it's really, really easy to roll out.
It's not working. Please do not add as much flour as I did.
Then I'm going to push down with my fingers, and you should be getting air bubbles at this stage. I like to just let gravity do the job, basically.
I want to get my pizza up off the counter and right onto my stone.
So I purposely shaped this in the shape of a Christmas stocking.
It doesn't need to look like a perfect rectangle or a perfect circle. All it has to do is taste really, really good.
That looks good.
I never put oil in my dough. I always put oil on the dough. I go with Parmesan onto my dough.
I like to start with the mozz instead of the sauce because the sauce makes the middle of the pizza a little mushy if it goes on first.
Now we want to add the sauce.
People make a mistake here and they put too much sauce on.
You don't want to be too stingy with the sauce.
I don't really spread it out. I leave it in blobs.
That looks good.
I like to leave an edge.
Now we add the cheese.
Pecorino Romano.
Parmesan in the middle for my first bite. Then I'm going to put my mozzarella, and then I'm going to put some bel paese. Bel paese kind of melts like cream. I'm getting quite hungry thinking about it.
If you're feeling fancy, you can do yourself a favor and stuff some of the cheese into the crust. So when you bite into the crust, it's a little surprise inside. Now we want to grab our mixed vegetables, throw it on the pizza.
Basil. A little bit of pepper.
I'm not going to cut the mushrooms. I'm going to leave them in big pieces. A couple of olives. The sausages, just like this. Then I like to go back in, oil on the edge.
The olive oil around the edges are going to make the edges nice and crispy.
That looks professionally done. I think we're ready to put it in the oven. We're going to put it in at 450 degrees Fahrenheit for about 10 to 12 minutes, and we'll see if it's ready to rock and roll.
And this is my pizza. 500-degree oven, 12 minutes, and it's perfect.
So our pizza is fresh out the oven. I put it in for an extra 3 minutes just so the crust could get a little bit crispier to my liking.
This oven here mimics a wood fire oven. 3 minutes later, approximately, we're going to take this pizza out. You know, I'm a big fan of a lot of colour on a pizza. I don't like them too bland looking. This one's a little dark around the edges, that's fine.
Let's top it off with the arugula, a little bit of extra virgin olive
Oil
oil.
on the outside, pepper, a little bit more salt, basil. Break it on there so it's first thing you smell when it gets to the table.
Only sauce, cheese, and basil on this pizza because that's Richie's favorite. So here's a pizza for my Richie.
It looks good.
I think it looks delicious, and I know it tastes delicious.
Looks good, if I say so myself. Now I'm actually going to taste this.
Oh, good.
That's good.
Yeah, good. Does have the characteristics of a wood-fired oven.
Sadie sauce, good dough. You can't beat it.
This is going to be my Tinder profile. Just this pizza.
We saw 3 different chefs make 3 different pizzas. Making pizza dough involves a fermentation reaction. This is a series of chemical reactions that takes the sugars naturally found in flour and converts them into carbon dioxide, ethyl alcohol, and flavoring compounds. All pizza doughs are leavened with yeast. The carbon dioxide produced by the yeast helps to leaven the pizza dough while it's baking. Stephen used a store-bought pizza dough that had yeast in its ingredients.
Oh my God.
Beth made a homemade pizza dough and mixed in dry active yeast.
The yeast looks nice and bubbly to me.
By adding water to the dry yeast, you can hydrate it and then mix in some flour to start the fermentation reaction. Sim used pre-fermented starters in his pizza dough.
If you can put more pre-ferment in, you're going to get a lot more flavor.
Pre-fermented starters start the fermentation process before they're mixed in with the pizza dough ingredients. Starting this process early develops flavor compounds in the starter, and this can be done over a period of years, like we saw in Sim's starter.
This particular one has been around for about 3 years.
We can add that back into the pizza dough to provide a complex flavor profile. Protein provides viscoelasticity to bread dough. Using a high protein flour like Sim did will give the dough stretch and rise when it bakes.
The flour should be high gluten flour and will give us a nice stretchy dough.
Using a moderate protein flour like Beth did will not provide as much elasticity in the bread dough and will not create as much puffiness or air bubbles in the final product.
What I like about this recipe is that the dough doesn't spring back.
All of our chefs used a tomato-based sauce on their pizza. Stephen used a jarred sauce. Beth and Sim both made homemade tomato sauce with canned tomatoes. Canned tomatoes are picked at peak ripeness. This means that the starches in the tomatoes have been converted into sugars, and the tomatoes in our cans are quite sweet. Fresh tomatoes in your grocery store may not be at peak ripeness, which means they ultimately might not be as sweet. Stephen used pre-shredded, low-fat mozzarella on his pizza. Pre-shredded cheeses are coated in an anti-caking agent. This helps to ensure that in storage, they don't clump together or cake together. When this is heated in an oven, the cheese will hold its shape and won't create a uniform layer over the pizza. Stephen chose a low-fat cheese to top his pizza.
Part skim, so it's a little bit on the healthier side.
Lower-fat mozzarellas separate more easily when exposed to heat, creating an oily layer on the top of the pizza. Beth used whole milk mozzarella and grated it by hand.
I only use whole milk mozzarella.
These two factors improve the meltability of the cheese over the pizza. She also added pecorino, which will add another layer of flavor.
You can't get too much cheese on a pizza.
Sim intentionally staggered 3 different cheeses over his pizza. This will provide a unique eating experience by tasting different cheeses as you eat a slice.
Thinking about the future a little bit all the time when you're doing this stuff.
When you roll the pizza dough, the elastic nature of the gluten in the dough pulls it back to its original form, creating a thicker crust.
Nobody likes thin crust pizza. It's a myth.
When you stretch the pizza dough, we can stretch out the gluten and create a thinner crust.
The reason why this is so stretchy is because of all that high gluten flour and all the gluten that we developed in there on the table, like this.
When adding toppings to the dough, we want to prevent sogginess. One way of doing this is by adding a layer of cheese before adding the sauce, like Beth and Sim did.
Sauce makes the middle of the pizza a little mushy if it goes on first.
Another way to do this is by pre-cooking the toppings, like Sim did.
Most toppings I pre-cook.
Pre-cooking your topping draws out some of the moisture, creating a nice crisp crust. Using raw toppings, like Stephen did, can allow the moisture to seep out and create a soggy crust.
Okay, that was close.
Stephen and Beth used the highest temperature setting on their oven to create a crisp pizza cooked over a longer period of time.
It's about 500 screaming degrees.
Sim used a specialized pizza oven that has a much higher temperature than a home oven and can cook the pizza in just minutes to create a really crispy crust.
This oven here mimics a wood fire oven.
Everybody has their own preference when making pizza. Whether it's a thin or thick crust, using different toppings or cheeses, there's a lot to learn from the pizza making methods.